wish I'd put it as well as you just put it.
I'm sorry, I'll take it back. From the tapes.
What you said is really good.
We're back 23 years later, so just short, but we're back and we're excited to be back. Danny, I heard you say something that kind of moved me, especially in relation to kind of coming back for screenings, that it was doing Q&As for screenings that sort of brought you guys back together and birthed this project that we're here for now. Tell me about kind of how that has been for you and kind of how that has been reigniting your creative partnership.
I'm sure it happens with you as well. You get odd invitations occasionally to screenings of films that have, they've been made a few years ago, and you go, oh, that's wonderful that they're still screening that, and you think, will anyone turn up? You always think, no, probably not. but you agree to do a Q&A because you think it supports cinema, and we know the pressure cinema faces. The relationship with streaming is such a complex one for audiences, and so there's been a couple of screenings of 28 Days Later, 15, 20 years after the film was actually out in the cinema. And I would go along to them and they were like packed. I mean, packed. And people, but it wasn't just that, it was that the ferocity of people's engagement with them was proper. Yeah. And it felt like, even more than Trainspotting, which is a bit cooler, a bit more, that's another one that's survived, but, you get screenings of it, but people are a bit cooler about it. There's not any coolness. It's like, come on, Gillian, go for it. It's all this at the end as he starts that process at the end. Anyway, and I would call Alex or text him and say, listen, it's like, and so maybe we should, and we started, through various things like this, we started talking about where we've ended up now with this film. But it's a process, yeah. And people would be interested to know that they are part of that process. Their engagement is definitely part of it. If those things didn't exist, we'd be in a slight more of a vacuum, thinking like that. But for me, it kind of energizes me. I think there is an appetite there, and we should see if we want to address it.
Yeah, well, cinema is bringing people together, of course. Thank
Yes.
you. Not to start on a bit of a heavier note, but also to start on a heavier note. Obviously, we've kind of just come through this mass pandemic that we've been through altogether that's kind of irreparably changed the way that we interact, the way that we kind of rebuild from things. How did that impact the way you approach this new chapter in the franchise?
Well, I think there's an obvious way. The opening scene of the original film is quite well known. The walking around London, and people suddenly saw it in each of their own capital cities around the world, and connections were made with that. But for us, it was also really interesting and really helpful in rehearsal, and also in production, in talking about everything as you do. You spend a lot of time mulling it over what you're doing. Most critically then with the actors, everybody had a reference point to say they'd been through an experience which was a moment where suddenly things stopped in a way that's unimaginable, to this break stop of culture. Bang, suddenly you were on your own or in a very small group, and your behaviour had changed immediately. And it wasn't just that, it was also the way that you then negotiated that change as you become accustomed to the new rules and you begin to flex and take more risks. And that feeds into the film quite clearly. You cannot live for 28 years at that level of extreme caution. Yeah. You have to kind of find where you can move into the territory again, most obviously with the boy being taken to the mainland for his blooding.
Don't look at what's in front of you. Moving up and down again.
I think one of my favourite things about the film is this sort of uncanny undercurrent of this Britishness that's sort of preserved in amber a little bit. You kind of see it in the train, you see it with this sort of like working men's club set up. And you're mentioning the boy, we kind of see him like have these things that are represented to him and explained to him, but aren't these actual tangible things that we know. Talk to me about that and how that was sort of your way in.
Well, I think it's quite simple in a way, which is Danny and I are both British, and we're also British filmmakers. We tend, separately altogether, we tend to work in this country. Mm-hmm. Neither of us, as it were, sort of went to Hollywood, which was a phrase that used to exist.
Yeah, well,
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It used to. It was a thing. So-and-so's gone to Hollywood.
Yeah, that's right,
What people
yeah.
would say. And I also think the other thing is we react to the world around us. Our films are basically reactive to things that are happening or things we're observing or thinking about. So I think it probably just naturally flows from that. And there is somewhere in there something intentional, which is to deliberately hold on to these things. I think there was a decision, I'm sure separately and together, to not do that and to stay here and keep working in this country. I sometimes do films which are set in foreign countries, but we shoot them here. I did a film which was sort of notionally set in Louisiana. We shot it in Windsor. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Anything from you, Danny? What did you think about it?
I think the most obvious example is that we decided to drive the virus back from France, which the title card announces at the beginning. And so if you were expecting, after, say, 28 weeks later, for it to be a film about it spreading across Europe or across the world, we sort of felt that had been covered by many other people since the original film, and that we wanted to reinvestigate our homeland, really. And I love, personally, being in a box. I love being contained and suddenly having to think, where are the resources going to come from? How is this idea going to work? And Alex writes like that. It's the spin of imagination in the scene setting that's surprising. It's not a limitation, the fact that you just stay in England. I mean, there's a little bit in Scotland, a little bit in Wales, and a little bit in the Cheddar Gorge and things like that. But it's basically England, and it's like endlessly fascinating. As natives, it is for us to be. It's endlessly fascinating, our heritage, and our present day and our future, really.
Yeah, totally. I think we really felt this in our cinemas from the moment the trailer dropped. You would see people kind of, get still in their seats and be really, really kind of wrapped in what they were seeing. And I think it was the Rudyard Kipling poem and the way that you deployed it in the film as a sort of intergenerational, reckoning with, masculinity, loss of innocence. Talk to me about that and talk to me about the choice to use that archival footage alongside it.
I wish I'd put it as well as you just put it.
I'm sorry, I'll take it back. Run the tapes.
What you said is really good.
How did the poem first?
The interesting thing about it is that it was a kind of reverse process to what normally happens. Normally, they'll take something from a movie and use it in the trailer, and you're going, oh, don't do that, because we want people to just experience it in the film. But in this case, we were looking for a poem, for a song, a hymn, something from the past to go with this archival footage. And this way that the culture of the island, the Holy Island community, was being passed on to the younger generations. And obviously in the ceremony, it's almost a ceremony of him making his way to the mainland, even though his mother objects. And we couldn't really find one. We hadn't really found anything. And then this trailer popped up. Sony said, what about this? I don't even think they were sure it was a good idea or not, because it was so extreme and didn't tell the story of the film. But it did give us this track, which neither of us knew at that moment. And we were like, I think we were both, I remember, it was a moment of, wow, what is that?
It's so haunting, yeah.
And we immediately tried it in the film, over the archive footage. And it's one of those things that you can always tell they just fit. You don't need to mess with them. You don't need to do too much manipulation. You do craft it a bit later, but it just sat there. And it was like, that's what we've been looking for. So, yeah, we were very lucky to get it like that. And it is extraordinary. Its power, it's over 100 years old, the recording, and its power is undiminished. I mean, perhaps it's increased, I don't know, but by the fact it is so, it seems so remote in one sense, and yet it has a gathering power within it.
Yeah. I guess Alex also coming off the back of making several films about war and obviously the history of this poem with soldiers. Could you talk a little bit to that and about your connection to?
I'm not sure I can. I mean, in as much as the process Danny just described is very like what really happens in film. I think filmmaking is often from the outside seen as being super intentional. And actually, we're more like magpies, and we're constantly scanning.
Yeah.
And that, in a funny way, this track, this Boots poem, comes up quite a lot. But it's partly it shows what always happens when you're making a film. You don't make the film thinking, I'm going to put this track here and this track there and this track there. Maybe some people do, but it's not normally like that. You're just scanning.
Yeah,
and
constantly.
Yeah, and this one just shows you the process of the scanning in a funny kind of way.
Yeah.
Actually, oddly, the first film, 28 Days, had a more direct correlation to war, because it was a product of something, and I was sort of thinking, I think I'll try bringing war to the UK to sort of shake it up a bit on some level. It was something like that. But this one, I think it had other considerations. It was more about family than war, actually.
Yeah.
Much more about family was the thought process. Yeah.
Your eyes drop, they will get the top of you. Boom, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war.
The films that you've made together share this real vitality and dynamism. You know, you talk about the editing, you talk about the different lenses you use, but I'd love to talk about the sound. You know, you have young fathers on board who did this amazing score, and then mixed with Johnny Byrne's kind of magical sound editing and moments. Talk to me about the sound of the film, if you can.
I think for both of us, it's a huge ingredient that you learn very quickly how important it is. And it's often the poor cousin. Certainly on set, sound recordists are not given the celebrity that cinematographers are, and certainly not you're very rarely asked to talk about them individually. You know, in the post, you know, in the publicising of the film afterwards and things like that. But I think it's one of the lessons I learned very early on was that I'd look in the cinema and I think, why do American films, whether they're good or bad, appear to have more punch than British films? And we didn't spend enough money on sound. And you've got to spend money, and because you're a bit hand to mouth with British films sometimes in terms of budget, the money often gets spent on the cinematographers and other things, and there's nothing left for sound afterwards. So we decided very early on to ring fence money for sound, and to keep money so that you could deliver with that punch. And if you are in a competition with American films. You can't deny that. People have a choice. And they often they want a full experience. And there's no better way to deliver that than through the sound landscape, both musically and atmospherically.
Yeah, totally. Just to end, obviously we're a cinema podcast, we're all about the cinematic experience. This is, as you just said, with the sound, with how it looks, with everything about it, is a film made for the cinema. Why is it important to both of you that people come out to the movies to see 28 Years Later?
Oh, I just love movies. I love movies in cinema, and if people don't go out to see them, it all dies. So that'd be my reason.
Yeah, amen.
I think it's also it's a cultural act that's really important at the moment, because we are moving towards a time when collective experiences are diminishing, and we're being encouraged to communicate to the whole world. We have this power of instant communication in the world, but we're encouraged to do it individually. And those collective experiences, like football, like cinema, like theatre, we've got to protect them, because something happens that's outside the control of the technologists, and is weirdly, in the movie, is weirdly celebrated by Kelson. His bone temple is a memorial for everyone, regardless of who or what they were. We belong to one family, and it's good to remind ourselves of that sometimes.
Great, so cinema is the closest thing we're getting to a bone temple then. Great note to finish on.
Thank you for watching Picture House Cinema's unique video content. Hit the subscribe button to be kept up to date with our movie news, cast and crew interviews, highlights, trailers, and lots more.